to do their work. How do we do that? We want to explore it and be able to look at what opportunities are available. What this panel is not trying to do is to expose the panelists to harassment after this session. They're only helping us to understand their funding ecosystem, and also if you're doing a good job, how can you get access to support that helps you deliver the tax ahead, making sure that we can track the plans that are developed and ensure that we don't lag, as we keep hearing that we can only plan and not execute as a continent. But we need to be active in ensuring that plans are executed. So to help me do this, and as the protocol has been, you clap as they come. So I have here with me Mrs. Sandra Kidwingiri from Diaconia, who is the Africa Economic Justice Program Manager for Diaconia Africa. So thank you very much, Sandra. I also have with me Mr. Titus Gwemende, who was earlier on the panel, Division Director, Opportunity and Equity, Open Society Foundation. I have also with me Ms. Rita Ifa, Senior Climate Finance Officer, Africa Development Bank. Thank you. And I have also with me Mr. Mohamed Sultan, Regional Lead, Africa Global Methane Hub. Yes. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And Sandra, sorry, but I'm going to have to start with you. You're sitting next to me. Yes, so as I indicated, I mean, there is the need for support for some of these conversations to continue. There is the need for support for research and academic work around energy, climate change, resource governance to continue. And we want to explore from your experience, how does the funding landscape look like? What do we need to do to be able to assess funding to do the work that we have to do to ensure that we can be sustainable in the long term?
Thank you so much, Benjamin, and thank you for having this panel. I would say it's not a very common topic to discuss in such conferences. Most of the time we have it as a side discussion. So thank you very much for that. From my experience, and I have to state that I work for Diaconia, which is an international non-governmental organization, whose, I would say, very strong mandate is to support civil society organizations to achieve their objectives in various thematic areas, with very broad thematic areas on gender justice, human rights, and democracy. And as such, I think we have had quite a lot of experience in resource mobilization, and also in assessing how the funding landscape is. I would say what we have observed of late is that part of the challenges that civil society and advocacy groups face when trying to access funding is more often than not lack of information on the strategic priorities of the donor institutions. And I think that's one area where civil society should invest in to ensure that then they are not competing for the very few visible institutions, both bilateral institutions, private foundations, multilateral institutions, and so on. Because when you are trying to approach very few institutions, you end up seeing some level of competition among civil society, while that should not be, because we usually say that there are enough issues to solve. No institution should compete with another. You should be aware of your niche, be aware of what we call your unique selling point and know who to approach. So I would say that's generally one area that I would say civil society and advocacy group should invest time in, knowing the strategies of the funding institutions, knowing which funding institutions are aligned with their priority. So for example, ourselves, I manage a program on economic justice, and part of our prioritized thematic areas for this period would include domestic resource mobilization, would include the curbing illicit financial flows, would include issues related to tax justice, public debt, and so on. So what is key then, if you're approaching such an organization, is to ensure that your work is aligned around those areas. So that, I think, is one very important issue. But linked to that, what I would also want to say is that donor priorities are not, I would say, developed in a vacuum. There is possibility for civil society organizations and research academicians to influence the strategies of the donor institutions. And I think particularly researchers have a very good opportunity to do that, because that's what they do. They research on what are the primary issues facing the citizens, and then it's very easy that way to make a case for your issue to be included among the priorities. So on the funding landscape, I know there has been a perception that maybe there's less funding for civil society organization or for development in general. My personal assessment is that it's not that necessarily there's less funding, but there seem to be more issues to deal with. They are the perennial development issues we've been working on. There are issues related to the climate crisis, which is with its own share, I would say, of emergencies that need to be responded to. So it's true that there are many needs, but I would say there is still room for expanding and looking into opportunities that may be with a various range of institutions, not just limiting to the visible one. I was discussing with someone from the United States a few months ago, and one thing he mentioned that was very new to me is that there are about 10,000 private foundations in the United States. And he was asking us, why is it that in Africa you seem to be targeting less than 10? So there are opportunities to be explored, and I think I would encourage everyone to continue to do that. I'll stop here from now, and thank you very much.
Wow, thank you. I never knew we had 10,000 foundations across the world. So, Mohamed, I just wanted to build on this. Sandra talks about donor priorities, and perhaps shedding light on what priorities you are seeing in the climate change ecosystem, energy transition ecosystem. I know you deal with emissions issues, so what are you scanning to be the priorities of donors, not just for GMH, but broadly in the landscape?
Yeah, thank you so much. Benjamin, before I start, let me really thank ASAP again for putting on this conference. It's just absolutely fantastic to see the evolution and to see the number of people that have stuck around. I think it's not a given that this would have happened, and I think it's also a sign that probably we need to continue to push to make sure that there's a lot more actionable spaces for African non-state actors in particular to engage in a more sophisticated way with public decision makers, with the research community, and with the private sector in order to move this agenda forward. And the agenda is fundamentally justice. In this case, it's climate, but it's development, and it's a number of related issues. I'll answer your question, but I'll also say a couple of additional things. I think donor and funder priorities, this is where the power dynamics come into play. And I think when we think about donors, there's obviously a variety of actors, and we can think about bilateral support that's coming through official development aid, that very little actually trickles down to domestic civil society. You mentioned, Sandra, the expansion of private philanthropy, particularly in the global north. And yeah, it's absolutely wild, to be honest with you. I work in philanthropy, and we see the evolution of even family foundations that will never really be on the radar for community groups or local organizations across the world. So the gap between those that do work at a local level and those that have resources to allocate is absolutely huge. Not dissimilar from what we discussed yesterday around the financing for energy. The capital or the resources seem to be there, but the power dynamics and the priorities make it so that it's very difficult for it to flow to a place like this. And that is a structural deficiency that I think needs to be addressed in the way that African civil society in particular thinks about organizing what is essentially an industry where intermediaries exist, an industry where consultancies exist, an industry where folks have singular jobs, which is to matchmake. There are whole organizations whose unique role within the philanthropic landscape is to matchmake those that do the work and those that have resources. And it's something that grows every day. I'll give you just one example. In our work, at the Hub, we're very, very focused on expanding or casting a much wider net in terms of the organizations we support. So it'll go from the World Bank to ASEP, to community organizations. When we were looking to find fiscal sponsors or regranters, African-led and based regranters, it was nearly impossible. It was nearly impossible to find organizations that are intermediating between the existence of private capital and the availability of ingenuity and social and political change. And I think we've got to really think about, from this side of the world, about how we participate in what is essentially an industry that has a private and sovereign interest at play. And that's something that, that there's a number of organizations working on, the African Philanthropy Network and others, but we need to collectively be thinking about that. Also, just maybe a couple of numbers, because I think we had the conversation this morning and yesterday on how foreign capital flows or non-African capital flows to support. But Bridgespan, which is a very powerful consultancy firm that operates in the philanthropic landscape, recently did an assessment of some of the largest African NGOs, top 85 NGOs out of Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya. They're outliers, to be honest. These three countries are outliers because they benefit from tremendous amounts of financial support. But out of those 85 organizations, half received their initial pivotal funding from international organizations, non-African organizations. Only 3% of the funding was coming from domestic philanthropy. And so that really highlights, and it's not that their priorities are not good priorities, it is that then it poses the question of legitimacy, of agency, of ownership, of direction of the work, which is absolutely critical in the transition, in the energy transition conversation and climate conversation. And so, because it is fundamentally also very political. And so I think, the first thing is really structural questions that we need to pay and that we need to pay attention to. In terms of where the priorities lie, I think they vary quite a bit. And as you said, priorities are not don't come in a vacuum. But the reality is that private entities set their own priorities. Some may be much better at listening to what's happening around, and some may be less good at doing so. But I think we're seeing a push for more justice in the work. We're seeing a push for more governance. And governance in the broad term, but I think that we're struggling to continue to make the case that accountability needs to be front and center in this conversation. It is not as prevalent as it was, let's say, 5-10 years ago, at least in the philanthropic landscape. And I believe it needs to come back. It definitely needs to come back. We're not seeing as much interest, I think, in everything that surrounds energy generation as we should see in things like advocating for better infrastructure investments, particularly here on the continent. We're not seeing as much traction in the development of, we talk a lot about sort of capacity building, but endogenous domestic capacity development is not something that a lot of money is going into for sure. But there's tremendous opportunities to make interconnected plays. So linking the evolution in the global architectural finance system, from addressing international financial flows to unlocking resources for climate investments domestically is something that is more and more present and that is more and more well understood as well. I think gender justice really, really important on many agendas. And so so it's kind of it evolves quite a bit. But I do want to say that what we're seeing in terms of some of the pieces of some of the ways African civil society actors, non-state actors, let me say, that includes academia and others, are starting to organize around the giving industry is multifold. One is really putting back power asymmetries at the core of the conversation and putting back real concerns about organizational health, institutional development, alongside the questions of project rollout, which is important but doesn't sustain the work. And so 4 things. One is sort of organizations are trying to build individual relationships more and more. And to be fair with you, sometimes decisions around grants are arbitrary. And I don't say arbitrary in the sense that it's bad, but you're never going to have all of the information necessary to make the best decision, but you do have access to a lot of information. So building relationships is really critical. The second is a lot of organizations here on the continent, those that are growing, are starting to realize that they're establishing foreign entities to be able to legally be able to attract funding that's coming from outside of the continent, whether it's in the US, in the UK, or in Europe, legally to be able to be more present. And then they're staffing in a way that's slightly different, to be able to operate in sort of an omnidirectional world, where you're having to interact with, one day, the African Development Bank, and the next day, it is a community organization. The following day, you're working with parliamentarians. You need to be able to staff as a way to be able to address those in a meaningful way. So, yeah, let me stop here maybe, and then send it back to you.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. And it's good you open up, the relationship we need to build beyond the capacities that we have. It's human society, and how do you sell your capacity to even attract attention and get people to know what you're doing? That's really, really important. And also knowing the spectrum of issues that are being addressed that civil society and actors can actually focus on. Perhaps also, how do you even search to get to know these specific foundations and getting to know that there are more than 10,000? How do we get to know them? It's another challenge. But Rita, from your end at the bank, if you could highlight some of the specific things that you're focusing on in the bank to support the ecosystem, civil society, academics, and also even some research work that you are all interested in at the bank that people can tag along.
Thank you, Ben. Similarly, it's an honor to be here the second time for the conference, and this time as a panelist and not a moderator. So the African Development Bank, I think when you hear of the African Development Bank, often CSOs cannot relate in the sense that they are not aware that the bank actually works with CSOs, and it has a CSO division dedicated to bringing CSOs, African CSOs, closer to the bank, be it at the bank's regional member country level or at the HQ level. The bank also, even though its primary beneficiary are governments, it also has seen, of course, the relevant role that civil society organizations, particularly NGOs, academic institutions, research institutions on the continent play. And so more and more, it's making available funding instruments that CSOs can directly tap into. And one of such funding windows is the Africa Climate Change Fund. Is a fund which is now 10 years in existence. It's a fund that mobilizes donor funds in the form of purely grants to provide to CSOs between $250,000 to $1 million per project. Of course, it's a fund, so its resources are limited. Hearing the conversations on the table, on the panel, as ACCF, we solicit projects through calls for proposals, and they are competitive. So I can't sit here and tell you if there are 10, 20, 100 NGOs in this room, if they apply to ACCF calls for proposals, they will get it. I want to also maybe also use this avenue to also mention that some of the observations we see when we launch our calls for proposals, mind you, this is a climate action fund. So the focus is on providing either adaptation or mitigation project type projects, supporting mitigation or adaptation projects. And so some of the challenges we face or we see for NGOs, and one of the beneficiaries of the fund are African NGOs. I want to stress African because the fund was set up to support African NGOs raise the needed funds to do advocacy work, not just advocacy work, but also implement some climate action at the local level that can be scaled up. So what we noticed when we launched the call for proposal is that we get a lot of interest from African NGOs. Most often than not, after further review, we realize they are not legally registered in the country in which they want to operate in. This is a simple thing, but very serious. At the end, the ACCF sits in an institution that's a multilateral development bank with a AAA rating. So it has to be careful how it provides financing, even though it wants to open to many. So that's one. The second thing we also notice is that NGOs doing work in certain areas, because they've seen the call for proposal and they are not fit for it, will want to apply. So a huge number of the NGOs we turn down are NGOs that do not have any experience in the call for proposal field. Mohammed says something that calls for proposals evaluations can be arbitrary. But we try to be very specific by providing a lot of guidance as to what we are looking for, what the evaluation criteria is. But more and more, these are the things. One other crucial thing, which I consider a challenge for African NGOs, is that some NGOs that may even be operating they've never had an audit. So again, we talk about accountability, transparency. If you're applying to a call for proposal, you can't even prove after the fiduciary assessment that you've never done an audit. It's I want to call it a family-owned type of NGO. It's not properly structured. You will not get the funding. And so I think one of the key things, at least I want to stress, is that the African Development Bank has said these financing windows available. But for you to participate in it, you have to be properly structured. You have to be well set up to be able to do it. Having talked about the ACCF, I also want to mention, again, another financing window. Let me step back and say that a lot of the NGOs in the room are looking for grant financing, which is limited, first of all. You are competing with governments that need grant financing to buffer their concessional loans they are taking, at least in the climate change space. You are competing with many, many institutions to tap into the same resource. So for you to be able to distinguish yourself and stand out, you have to do certain things right. And so these are some of the things I've mentioned as the challenges, but if you're able to address them, you're able to be able to apply to the ACCF as one. The bank also launched or established a new financing window called the Climate Action Window. And this was done in its effort to mobilize more grant resources to African Development Fund countries. These are 37 low-income countries in the African continent. And most of the resources that has been mobilized, NGOs can also access funding. Obviously, the fund, like the ACCF, is set up that we don't want you to just come with a proposal that says, I want to do 10 capacity building meetings. We want to see specific outcomes. And again, going back to challenges of inaccessibility for NGOs, you stress while advocacy, we agree, is important. A lot of these funds are looking for specific on-ground projects, at least, even if there is advocacy and capacity building. It's a component of a larger effort to address the impact of climate change on our communities from the climate change side. So we don't, these fundings, I can speak for ACCF, the Climate Action Window, and many other climate change funds out there, they are not looking to fund purely advocacy work. So this is really, really important for NGOs in the room to to realize. Then finally, I've said many challenges. Some of the things we've seen work, even from the ACCF side, are when two NGOs partner. Sometimes it can be a big, well-established NGO like ASEP working with a lesser-known local NGO. They each play to their advantage. Maybe the local NGO is more community-based in the area where that project intervention is meant to happen. That collaboration between African NGOs putting in applications can also lead to positive results. So for the ACCF, so far we funded 28 projects. About 18 of them are NGO-led projects. It's a mix of international NGOs working with local NGOs or domestic NGOs working with either community-based organization. This is a model that works, and we'll encourage that you look into such partnerships. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for letting us know what the bank is doing. I just want to move to Titus in the interest of time. I realize we're just almost there. So Titus, I mean, you've been in this space for a while also, and you've seen a lot of NGOs, academics apply for grants. What will make you not put money into an organization? I mean, what are the challenges the problems you see, with NGOs that makes it difficult to fund them?
So I'm not mentioning names. But anyway, thank you very much for the opportunity. I work with Open Society Foundations. I think we've funded a good number of partners I have seen in the room. We have different tools. We do give grants. We give grants to really different sectors: universities, individual academics, journalists, community organizations, think tanks, you name it. I think we have a pretty broad menu of partners we work with, including governments and companies. So there's the grant element, but there's also the impact investment element, where we're really looking at early stage entrepreneurs, excellent innovations, whether it's energy transition or agriculture processing. We usually take a very generalized approach, but we're in the process of reviewing our criteria for impact investment. Very proud to mention that we have a couple of African startups that we just closed quite some good deals with in recent years. But a lot of the work we've done it's with these NGOs. We don't necessarily work in all 55 African countries. There are countries that are more, I don't want to call them priority, but we tend to work in certain countries and not others, and we have a metrics for doing that. Some of the things that I think we have seen impacting partners negatively is being obsessed with donor priorities. And I have to say this with humility, and I'm not joking. Once you obsess too much over donor priorities, can you imagine when they started discussing going to war during the liberation? Do you think they started thinking? Do you think war is a donor priority? Do you think we would find funding if we start going to war? I think if your starting point is always the donor, it's always problematic. Your starting point should be your cause. What is the issue you are trying to deal with? And sometimes we end up seeing so much performative politics before a donor, trying to be seen, trying to talk to them. The critical issue that will get your audience of funding is usually your cause and the clarity with which you address it. Whether it's your theory of change, your method, your message. And I would really encourage people to focus on that. Money tends to gravitate towards the best ideas, not always, but in most cases. And so for me, that's a crucial thing. Money doesn't gravitate towards you because of the clarity at which you describe the problem. You will be surprised at the things that you are told. We had a coup, then they are just killing everybody, and then everybody was killed again. It's not so much about the gravity of the problem, but the opportunity that you can clarify. And you can see it in proposals, that out of 19 pages, 12 are about the problem. And so for me, the issue is, are you really clear in writing and in speech about the opportunity you see in your country? The opportunity you see in the theme. So we could say, well, we have the problem of artisanal mining. Well, we know the problem. What do you see as the opportunity? And you're not going to be able to solve all the problems. What is this one thing that we can rely on you? So that level of focus, not trying to boil the ocean and be the only one trying to do that, would really help. So those are the issues. Of course, there are also institutional issues that you're looking at. You're looking at governance, you are looking at the people. I would be lying if I'd say there is a donor that doesn't look at the people applying or the institution. There are those big men NGOs. There's always the big men on the media. If you go to the office, the largest office, it's always about that one lady or that one man. They are usually lucky first or second cycle, and then you begin to see that they take the oxygen out of the room for everybody. So you want an actual institution, not just a big man or a big woman. So systems that are in place, an organization that functions, or at least that is trying to function, a board, staff, safeguarding issues. I mean, you can be very good, but if you're operating in a toxic environment, how you treat interns, how you treat junior employees, those things are important. And they can impact whether or not you can get funding. Those are crucial issues. But in terms of the organization is value for money, what is the cost of doing business with you? There are big organizations that we're ignoring right now, not because they don't know, but just the cost per dollar is just not worth it. So you're also looking at value for money, your programs, your cost profile, and things like that works. And then there are more complicated and worrisome things where you say, I work in a country which donors don't seem to care about. And I think that is true. I mean, I think with aid and trade, what we have seen is aid is following strategic interest of donors, particularly the bilateral ones. And so if they don't see a mining interest, an agricultural interest, then their donor arm isn't there. So if you operate in such a country, it may have problems, but it's not a donor. I do think we're also getting to a point where those collaborations are important. ASAP working with some organization in Sierra Leone or in Mali, it's not always good to go it alone. So consortia or finding a way, I don't want to call it coalition, but working together and coming together in a group and say, we can deliver these 5 outcomes. Group A will do 1, 2, 3. Then it becomes more efficient, easier, and you can be cushioned if you are part of a consortium that includes countries that are popular, whereas you come from a country that's not popular. Agility, it is organizations that are very agile that tends to, you remember during COVID, there are guys who could shape narrative around COVID quite quickly. Some woke up a year or 2 after. They are now looking for COVID money right now. So your own mental agility, your ability to interpret, synthesize things quickly and come up with a program of action. Starting to look for money now for elections. Colleagues, it's too late. If you're in Ghana, people who were thinking elections 2 years ago are the ones that are thinking about. It's the same thing whether it's climate change or what. You want to be very agile. And so the question around your own skill, I think, is crucial. There was a time when NGO work wasn't for the smartest in some countries. Now, if you fail in private sector, go to, no. It catches up with you if you're dealing or you're working with people who are not clear. Cutting edge innovation, people who know different disciplines, multidisciplinary ability to really respond quickly. All those issues are really going to be important. Lastly, and I will be very honest, I mean, he said it, sometimes it's arbitrary. It is life, some donors like certain people more than others. And it's wrong, but that will always happen. And so your ability to maintain good relationships matters. Don't be that director always caught up in an office. What is the director doing in an office anyway? I think building relationships with development partners is important. Explain don't always assume that people know that you're on TV or you produced a beautiful report. Take time to explain. And don't just try and explain to the donor director. Usually it's the most useless man, that one. Talk to the program, some of the ones that you think are the lower ones. I tell you, they are the ones that will make it difficult for you. But the challenge is if I'm the director, I talk to the director. Usually they don't know anything, those ones. So when you're engaging donors, talk to the entire line. You are better off doing that way, and make sure a lot of them know. If you try to be elitist about this one of these days you'll tell me that doesn't work. Anyway, all the best with that.
Thank you very much. All that I want to say is that they have told you the truth. So program around that. You know, I've been hearing that you have to focus. You have to know the time to do what you're doing. Donors have priorities, but you can also sometimes influence the priorities of the donor. Not all the time. You have to stay connected. You have to have an organization, right, as I'm hearing, so that you are not the one man running the show. They want to see your office, and you are sending them to a hotel. You know, so those are the truth I couldn't tell you alone, and I'm happy that they've opened up to share with all of us. We've run out of time, but I want to take maybe 2 questions from the floor, and then I can wrap up on this. So fortunately, I have 2. So one there and one here. So Daniel, I'll come to you, but there's a hand that came up at the last end. Oh, okay, I will take the 3rd one as well. Here. Yes, you.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Benjamin Jamra from University of Energy and Natural Resources, Sunyani. So my question goes to Rita. I want to know, how can banks leverage their resources and partnership with you to create dedicated funding streams or program that support sustainable living projects in local communities, since you deal with organizations and others? And what role can banks also play in facilitating access to these funds? Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. I gave you 1 opportunity and you took 2. Okay, I'll come to you, Daniel.
Daniel?
Right here.
Where's Daniel?
Yes.
It's okay. All right, thank you for the opportunity. I just want to add up to the last speaker about what some of the donors are looking for, or how do you sell yourself.
And he's been a seasoned donor, so he knows what he's talking about.
Oh, I beg you, don't. and sometimes, I don't want to mention the organization, all right, but sometimes we are looking at where the impact will be felt most before you are giving grants. You see, and there was a case where a think tank research organization put in a proposal. I was reviewing the proposal, and I saw some community-based organization proposal, and I compared the two, and said, research organization, think tank, you are in Accra, you want to go and do some community work, and you will need a community where there is no mention of even somebody, a volunteer on the field, and you want to go and do this academic work, and you go and share it with who? So I look at the community people, they have legitimacy with the district assembly. The chiefs know them, and they have that kind of people who are even volunteering. Now, so if we put money here, we'll get results that are impactful. Another thing too is that as NGOs, there are 2 ways of writing your proposal. There are solicited proposals and they are unsolicited. You can identify a proposal and a donor. Go to their website. They have their strategic plan there for 4 or 5 years. What are the focus areas? Then you write a proposal based on your baseline or whatever you are seeing on the field. Then you submit. Sometimes they may not respond immediately. They can say, oh, we have acknowledged receipt. But some of the donor institutions or the whatever country offices in Ghana, they have something they call budget, their budget for the country, for Ghana, for example. And then they have something they call burn rate. So if, let's say, USA, the American has given them maybe $5 billion for Ghana, and there's a time maybe for a year, and the year is getting there, they have not been able to even use half, then they are looking for this proposal that people submitted to them sometimes so that they can get brain rate. Otherwise, if they use maybe like 80% of the fund, next year or next time when they are going to do it, they will give them 80. They will not even increase it. Okay. So which means they are not able to, they don't have the capacity to utilize the money for Ghana. So let's write this impactful, unsolicited, and deposit them, give it to them, go to them and put it there. Once you are there, they call you, they say, oh, we have some 6 months, can you get us some, can you revise your proposal and make us work within 6 months? Put it, and you'll be there and they call you.
Thank you.
So let's not look at, be looking at only the one that are appearing on LinkedIn and NGOs for whatever, but look for building that relationship. So sometimes they receive a call, come and let's talk, because you have some information with them. So let's expand, and also the organization should be very credible. Are you compliant with the regulatory regulations and all those things? And now the donors are also looking at certain things they want to promote, like what do you call it? Safeguarding. Right. You have those safeguarding issues in your policies issues that they are looking at. So let's make sure that you have all these things. Sometimes when you even put the first thing, like when I receive it, I'll go whether you have a website in the first place.
And I think you have summarized the conversation.
Whether you have a Facebook, and what is happening there. Are you getting it? So let's see how we can do it. Thank you very much. And thank you for allowing me to use more than necessary time.
Thank you. Howard, was your consent captured? All right. I'll give you 30 seconds to do that.
I'll be timing you, Howard.
Trust you, Kojo, to do that. Thank you so much, ED and the panel. My name is Howard Mwesigwa, the team leader at the Climate Action Leadership Incubator from Uganda. And so I don't know whether this question falls within the scope of the panel, but it's to do with the future of the African CSOs beyond aid. What does that look like? I think it's a pertinent bit of the conversation. We talk about enhancing funding strategies. Yes, we're looking at the 10,000 foundations and the other opportunities. But in Uganda, there was a foundation called the DGF, which was closed. And when it was closed, about 1,000 CSOs froze. Like they could not do anything, right? And it was closed for political reasons, but the work they were doing with communities technically came to a standstill. So that is unfortunate, but in our fragile African ecosystem, it's a reality. So how best can NGOs and CSOs, in their funding strategies prepare for those times that they can continue beyond aid? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. So on that sustainability note, I just want to start with titles from the back so that we can walk this way. If you can touch on the sustainability, but I think the other question was directly at Rita.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question that we all have to reflect on, how far we will be able to go with this, and I suppose that's why there was a conversation around the diversification of business model for organizations. I think there will always be philanthropy, and philanthropy wasn't started by NGOs. Africans have always had ways in which they helped each other in cause. Of course, the difference with current philanthropy is it's rich people giving to people we think are poorer. But philanthropy, I think, will endure. The key issues...
is it fire alarm?
Is that an alarm? Is that a fire alarm?
Is that? Okay. There's no fire. All right.
So it's a drill. So I think philanthropy will endure, but our business model and funding streams will have to change. Relying on bilateral donors, relying on one type of donors, I think won't work. And there are different ways to do that. I don't know if we can exhaust that here, except change your business model. Philanthropy won't change. Diversify your sources and income, and invest in that capacity internally.
All right, thank you. So Rita.
For the question to the African Development Bank, I hope by bank, you don't mean commercial bank. I think, let's get that clear. So, I can see the gentleman. By bank, okay, so let me clarify. The African Development Bank is not a commercial bank. is a multilateral development bank. Like our peers, the World Bank, the African Development Bank provides concessional financing as well as other financial instruments, largely to support project infrastructure development in Africa. So I wasn't talking about a commercial bank, but nonetheless, in the context of the African Development Bank, as a multilateral development bank, its goal is to develop a suite of different financing instruments. And one of them, as I mentioned, largely the bank is pushing because its regional member countries, due to increasing challenges with borrowing, its regional member countries are pushing for the bank to mobilize more grant financing. That in itself is challenging. However, the bank is doing that, and one of the instruments it has set up is the Africa Climate Change Fund. So it does exactly what you're mentioning. It provides funding to NGOs, CSOs, government, research institutions, academic, to some extent, to implement climate action on the continent. With the CSO bracket, also largely community-based organizations are also supported. So I hope I've answered your question. In terms of commercial banks, I cannot say I know many commercial banks that are providing grant financing because by nature of their setup, that is not something they do. They might have corporate social responsibility, but that's a very small scale level. So anyway, I am happy to talk some more to clarify if this is not clear. Thanks.
Thank you. Mohammed, any final words?
Yeah, maybe just very briefly, because I think the last question, and Tatis touched on it. You know, I think civil society and non-state actors provide a public good that will forever need an injection of resources. So it's not like the work will be done without people being paid or necessary resources. What I think, however, is the degree to which those funds and resources influence the ability of organizations to make independent decisions, to set goals and priorities in ways that make sense for the developmental trajectory or other areas of focus. And as Tatis says, whether or not these organizations are able to continue to do the core of what they want to do. I think in a way, in this room, I really continue to believe that there's a structural problem with the way that African civil society thinks about accessing resources. And we continue to think about just putting up a couple of grant proposals and throwing them up, and then we've got these existing relationships and funders will go and refund the same organizations over and over again. I think we've got to be thinking about the ways in which domestic resources are allocated, the ways in which we are pooling resources, the ways in which we're collaborating and cooperating, the ways in which the legal and regulatory environment allows us to sort of even arbitrage between different funding sources. And I think we'll always need a variety of funding resources, but we've got to be much more intentional about the structure of giving on the continent, about vetting also the resources and how they come, and also just thinking through more creatively around the impact of those resources on the ability to deliver independently and more creatively.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think in summary, I would want to mention three things. One, I think the need of diversifying sources of funding. I think the colleague from Uganda has painted the picture very well. Even if you are still relying on grants, let there be grants from various streams, from a bilateral agency, a philanthropy organization, and a multilateral agency. Let them be different, because there will be shocks, there will be events that will shake donors. So you do not want to be in the situation that he is describing. Two, I would say build long-term relationships and partnerships. I think Mohammed has mentioned it. Sometimes even donors, donor agencies are quickly looking for people to partner with. So if you're only building relationships based on a specific grant, and then once the grant is not there, you're no longer available, that is problematic. And I think someone has just mentioned it in the room. Build broad and long-term partnerships that go beyond funding cycles. And finally, invest in visibility. You should be visible Because if, as Mohammed mentioned, when you're quickly looking for a partner to solve a specific problem that has been identified, you can only recall those you have seen before. If I'm seated in Nairobi and I'm looking for a partner in West Africa, I can only remember those I've met at events. I can only ask colleagues who are based in the region. So if you invest in being visible, that normally pays up after some time, because then you will see actually funders coming to you and not you going to them. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. Can we give it to the panel? I think the reason for this conversation for me has been achieved, to let us have that open conversation about how funds are raised, where do you find money to do your work, and how do you even prepare for the money that come in. And we've been doing it with some of our civil society partners, trying to build capacity. We've been sub-granting to some of you, and part of it has been the training to get you prepared, build organization, build systems that donors can appreciate, so that you become sustainable. And I'm thankful to the panel for opening up to some of the things that we've been sharing with you. And for us as an organization, sustainability in the next 5 years, which is quite ambitious, is to be independent, at least to the level of paying salaries without donor funding. All right, and that's how aggressive we want to go with it. So, and also, I mean, the highlights about building an organization, all these things you see here, you can ask the team. I've been less involved, all right, and the organization runs it. You know, so if we get to that level of getting people the opportunity to also show what capacity they have to think through all of these and get them done, then you will build an organization that works. And I'm happy that they've shared, you know, some of the things that we need to do to build capacity and be able to raise the resources we need to do our work. So on behalf of all of us, I want to thank you, panel, for taking the time to be with us. Can we give it up to the panel? Thank you. So, Kojo?
So while they take the group picture, please let's appreciate them some more. We are inching very close to the end, and no, we are not gone yet. Calm down. Thank you very much. So we have the final round of our innovation challenge. We'll strive to do that in the next 30 minutes, and we are out of here. So our judges are here. Where is Dr. Rivers in Opon? Okay, so our chief judge will give us an idea of what we are expecting today, what we are expecting from this final round.
Is it the judges?
Yeah. So what we are expecting from this final round. 3. Prof.
Can I check? I can't check. At this point, I have to release my chair.
Thank you so much. It's been an exciting couple of days. The past few days have been very exciting with all the innovative ideas we've had. So this evening, I'm actually expectant. I'm rooting for nobody, but I'm rooting for everybody. So I'm looking forward to who is going to actually win this. I know Benjamin has someone he's looking up to win, and I know others also have their champions, but I'm hoping that we can all be involved and make this as exciting as for the last 3 to be the ones still standing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just waiting for my last judge who was sitting here.
Oh, I think you wanted to.
Where is he? And then we can have that. So please, you can give us just a short song, but not going. We are not going yet. So another one. Maybe if you have another Wiala song, it would be nice. Yes. While we wait for our final judge, and then we'll start. So please bear with us for a minute.
Can we go?
So I am told that the meaning of the song still is "We are going home." So these people, they want to do something to me. Anyway, so in this final round, our contestants will be sharing with us a few things. How do they progress from prototype to pilot, strategies for commercialization and scaling, and also looking into the competence of the team. So we will start. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's invite Samson Owusu Bempa to come up and the team to come for questions from our judges on these areas that I mentioned. Please, let's appreciate them. Oh, you can sit in the middle here. Oh, don't feel free. Sit here. Yeah.
Okay, before you start, I wanted to mention that if you could just go straight to the point, and because that was one of the problems in the previous session, where we were doing a lot of talking for 1 minute, 2 minutes, you were just talking. So please go straight to the point, hit the nail right on the head. Let's feel what exactly you want to bring out for, because in this session, we are going to look at how your prototype can go further. We're going to judge on that. We're also going to judge on the strategies that you have for commercializing this, right? And then we're also going to look at your competence, you know, your team that you have. What are the team? How are you going to go forward? And so we're going to judge you on 3 main things, and those are the things. So please hit the nail right on the head of those ones. The floor is yours. Please, we have a timer for this. Okay, can we start now? Please, over to you.
Hello. Thank you. And please, the first question was?
So the first area you want to look at is your prototype to pilot. How do you want to move from where you are to piloting this?
Okay, so I'll talk about the smart aspect. Let my brother.
Moving from prototype to pilot, we are progressing steadily. Currently, we're able to break into the market, having some experiment and waiting on feedbacks. We're able to also expand, and then having support from some individuals who are actually supporting. We're also collaborating with our department of the university, which is actually helping us in machining some of the parts. And then going forward, we're actually looking at precision quality as well, and then the IoT aspect.
So actually looking at the IoT aspect, we need to ensure that there is no methane gas emission. That is a crucial component. And also the piping and instrumentation components are also, standardization, the material design and analysis. That's also something that we'll be looking at going forward. And in regards to the IoT system, there's also temperature sensors. We have pressure sensors to monitor and ensure that the system is able to function effectively per the operating conditions that it's supposed to operate within. Yeah, that's on that.
Now to your pilot stage. So how do you hope to commercialize it? From your pilot stage, how do you hope to make money from this then to make it such a viable project? And don't forget to also add the competence of your team for the sake of time.
All right. We are actually looking at liquefaction. We are working on liquefying the biogas and commercializing. So if you go on my website, my LinkedIn page, my Instagram page, you actually see we are advertising for the liquefaction. We actually made some sales, and then, we're looking at the going green. So we are having some solar panels in there to actually mitigate the energy demand for the liquefaction process of the biogas.
And that will make money how? How do you want to make money, the commercialization?
So we're going to sell. We're going to sell to the communities because our engine is also a combo. So when you buy the engine and you have to equally use our gas to be able to use it in your rural community, or you can actually ask that we come and set up